Yeah, I'm going to go pretty close to the top and just say Giannis Antetokounmpo. You always try to really look for the slates and the games and the matchups where Antetokounmpo can reach his ceiling, which is massive. And I think tonight could be one of those nights. They're 7.5-point favorites against the Raptors. This game's in Milwaukee. I guess there is some risk of blowout potential, but the Raptors are healthy. They've been playing some of their best basketball of the season, and while every star player for the Bucks is healthy, they lost Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton to health protocols yesterday. They're already down Dante DiVincenzo. There's just a little bit of depth concern right now with Milwaukee, and that could really kind of result in two things. One, they might not be as good as they could possibly be in this contest, and that would keep this game closer. And two, that might actually force Giannis to play a couple extra minutes in a situation where he normally wouldn't. And 7 times this season, he's played 36 minutes, which isn't even that crazy a minutes total. He's averaged 65.7 DraftKings points per game because he averages 1.7 DraftKings points per minute so far this season. So again, this is just a situation where if you ever think Giannis is going to play more than 35 minutes, you almost have to play him regardless of price.
All right, Whalen, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Giannis is one of the guys I have on my list. Garion read off a lot of the stats that I was going to lay out there. I mean, at this point, he's essentially matchup proof, but I do think going up against what's been an undersized Raptors front court, the way that they've handled this since everybody's come back with Pascal Siakam at center, there's not really anybody in the league who's a great matchup for Giannis, but the way that the Raptors line up, I think, is especially advantageous. So I think Giannis is in a great spot tonight, reasonable price tag at 11.6. I do like Joel Embiid if you want to go just a tiny bit cheaper. He's at 11,200. Really good matchup against the Orlando Magic. He has 270 DraftKings points games in his last 6. He's been over 60 DraftKings points 2 more times in that span, so he's been on fire. Obviously, you can pay up and go Nikola Jokic, who's probably the most matchup-proof player in all of fantasy right now. And if you want to save a little money, I think at 6,800, you could go down to Jusuf Nurkic. He's coming off of 21 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists in his last game. The minutes were starting to come up a little bit amid some injuries. I think Portland was just kind of trying to shake things up and spark something. They were finally playing him 31, 32, 33 minutes. So hopefully that's the case. If he stays out of foul trouble, at least that's been the case recently. But if you want to throw a little bit of a dart and go with upside and save money at center, I do like Nurkic.
Friar, what's your strategy here? Who are you going to build around at center?
Look, just to build off what everybody's saying about Giannis, I do agree if you're going to pay up at the center position tonight, that is the guy to go with. On top of all the stats that Nick and Garion have thrown out there, the last 5 times that Giannis and Pascal Siakam have gone head-to-head, Giannis has come 1 or 2 assists shy of a triple-double. I know he just got one on New Year's Day. This is a night, if you're going to go and get exposure to somebody on DraftKings Sportsbook for getting triple-double, Giannis would be the guy to back tonight because he's been knocking on that door every time he's been seeing Pascal Siakam. But if you want to save a little bit, I think Draymond Green tonight at 7.2K versus Dallas, normally not a guy that I want to go with, but I got to respect what he's done lately. He has back-to-back 44-point DK fantasy point performances. And there were 8 days between those 2 games because he was stuck on the sideline for a little while. And between those 2 games, he has 13 points combined. He's putting up 44 DK fantasy points in back-to-back games, and he's not scoring much at all. Of course, it's not necessarily his thing, but either way, this is a guy who's going to go and give you quite a bit of value. When you look at what he did against Miami, too, that was his last game. That's a team that doesn't give up a lot of fantasy points to bigs, whereas Dallas has given up the 6th most DK fantasy points to both power forwards and centers this season.
Yeah, he's $7,200. He's got that forward eligibility as well. And speaking of that, Mr. Whalen, who's the best forward option to build around?
Well, I want to save a little money, I think, at forward tonight, especially if I'm going to pay up for a guy like Jokic or Giannis or Embiid. So I like a couple options in kind of the upper middle range, one of which is Saddiq Bey at 8,300. Kind of a big price tag when you see the name Saddiq Bey, but he's playing a ton of minutes for the shorthanded Pistons. He has 50-plus DraftKings points in 3 straight. You would think at some point he maybe comes back down to earth, but Dwayne Casey has been throwing a ton of minutes his way. Hamidou Diallo is kind of priced right around that same range. I worry about him a little bit more. I think a lot of people will want to capitalize on some of the big games that he's had lately, but when he played 50 minutes in a game over the weekend, that's how shorthanded Detroit is. They should start to get some guys back, and I think we're going to see Hamidou Diallo's role scaled back at least a little bit. So to me, Saddiq Bey is the safer of those 2 options. I also like Kyle Kuzma, and I can't believe I'm saying this. He's been one of my least favorite players over the last few years. But again, it comes down to the minutes: 34, 34, 40, and 41 minutes in his last 4 games. He has 5 double-doubles in his last 6. At 7,700, I think that's a bargain against the Houston Rockets defense.
All right, Garion, you're also going to be spending a lot of money there on Giannis. So do you agree with Mr. Whalen? You got to save cash. Is this where you do it at forward?
Yeah, I think so. And I actually had a lot of the names he just mentioned written down. So I'll pivot to Norman Powell, who, for a lot of the same reasons, is viable tonight. He's $7,000. We don't really know what the status of the Heat's defense is going to be in this game. You're going to see a lot of Max Struss on Norman Powell. So I don't know. I just think when you look at his just volume the past 10 games, he actually leads all Western Conference players in minutes logged in that 10-game span. He's averaging almost 38 minutes a night, and that's probably not going to go down with Damian Lillard already ruled out. There's no CJ McCollum. I mean, you look at their last game against Atlanta, the night that Anthony Simons goes off for 43 points, he's the guy who had the 30% usage rate. Powell was kind of sitting around 20%. I could easily see that flip on any given night, depending on who has the hot hand. And even with just a 20% usage rate, Powell still brought back 47.5 DraftKings points in that contest. So I just look at him, the amount of minutes he's playing, and think $7,000, while it's a little bit higher than we're used to seeing Norman Powell, it's still a pretty good price.
All right, which guard do you need to get in your lineup? Let's go, Friar. We're going right to
guard. You know, my forward first.
Go ahead. You want to give me your forward? Go ahead. Sorry.
I'd like to, if that's quite all right. These guys got to give their forward. They're both talking about Sadiq Bey, and that's the guy I want. I'm getting ripped off here. And then Norman Powell's the other guy too, Garion. Thanks for that. But Sadiq Bey would be my number one option tonight. Even if I'm going with Draymond too at 8.3K, I would think that's going to scare people away. But then both these guys come out saying that they like this play a lot, and understandably so. The Hornets are not efficient defensively at all, and they lead the NBA in pace coming into tonight's game. This is one of the highest totals on the slate tonight, if not the highest. And he's in one right now. Sadiq Bey's on fire, and even with Cade Cunningham coming back last game, it hasn't impacted him. I think more, as long as Jeremy Grant's out, Sadiq Bey is a guy you have to consider each night. Hidemiro Diallo, absolutely not. I have no interest in that guy whatsoever. I know Nick was talking about him before, but yeah, Sadiq Bey is definitely my favorite forward tonight.
Take me right into guard. Go ahead. This is your show,
so I'm
babe.
going to go with Bradley Beal. I know I talked about him on Monday. Again, he's at a little bit higher price than he was last time, but he's going up against the Rockets in a game. Obviously the Rockets are struggling quite a bit. And I think when you look at how stacked the lineup is at bigs tonight, and then of course you got James Harden, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic all going tonight, I think that Beal's not going to be too chalky as good as an option. I think he is, because with Spencer Dinwiddie out, his usage goes up big time. Dinwiddie's riding 4 consecutive games with 55 plus DK fantasy points. Rockets are dead last in defensive efficiency, second in pace. So right now, and they're allowing a lot of fantasy production from both opposing point guards and shooting guards. So I think Beal is a guy who normally might be chalky on maybe on a smaller slate, maybe like a 6-game slate. But tonight, he's a guy who I think will just be, moderately used throughout tonight. So he's my favorite guard play.
Gary, and if our viewers are considering building a lineup around a guard, who would you recommend?
I think Nick's right. It's got to be Beal. You just look at how concentrated Washington's health issues are. It's every point guard not named Bradley Beal or Raul Neto. And Neto's really not getting that many minutes. So Beal's been forced to play 43 in each of the Wizards' past 2 games because, like I said, it's not just Dinwiddie. It's also literally the 2 guards they signed as hardship exemptions are now on the COVID list. They just don't have anyone to handle the rock except Bradley Beal, and that's just led to really the best stretch of Beal's season from a fantasy perspective. He's been kind of underwhelming for the first 2 months of the year, and now he's put up 55 DraftKings points in each of his past 4 games. The Wizards have the second highest implied team total on this slate. That obviously says more about the Rockets than it does the Wizards, but it doesn't matter how we got there. It just means they're going to score a lot of points tonight, and Bradley Beal is going to be at the heart and center of it, so it's really hard to fade that guy on this slate.
Yeah, Whalen, there are a lot of elite players in this 11-game slate, and Beal truly does stand out as one of the best of the bunch.
Yeah, Beal makes a lot of sense. Hard to argue against that. I think this is also a relatively good spot for Luka Doncic. I know he goes up against a really good team and a good defense in Golden State, but 10,600, for a guy who can give you 60 plus on any night, which he did in their last game against Denver, and it still kind of feels like he's, I don't know if he's playing his way into shape, but playing his way off of that ankle injury. It was a long layoff, and it felt like he hasn't really played that well in these last 2 games. He's still struggling with the 3-point shot. He was in foul trouble their last game against Denver, and yet he still has 62 DraftKings points in that game. So, you can never really go wrong with Luka Doncic. I would normally give an endorsement for DeJounte Murray, who I feel like I talk about, at least twice a week on this show, but he is coming off of COVID protocols, could be a little bit limited. We do expect him to play on the second night of a back-to-back, but, wouldn't be surprised if they limit his minutes a little bit due to conditioning purposes. And then the last guy I would consider is Fred VanVleet. 9,500, tough to ignore, even though you're going up against a tough matchup in Milwaukee. He has 55, 66, 57, 54, and 54 DraftKings points over his last 5 games.
All right, Gary, and I'm going to let you go first here when I'm talking value. Who is a value play you can build your lineup around? Because I'm looking, DraftKings Playbook, wow. This is a great article by you talking about value plays.
Oh, well, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Your approval means everything to me. Yeah, I think Caleb Martin is probably my favorite value play. His price point has gone up recently. It's not gone up enough. He's $4,500 tonight. He's been averaging 35.5 minutes his past 3 starts with Jimmy Butler in the lineup. Now there's no Jimmy Butler. The Heat have basically been running an 8-man rotation. They're getting Struss back, but, he's missed 4 games in the health protocols. I just think Martin could play upwards of 40 minutes tonight. And then you're looking at maybe some cheaper guard plays. I like Kiefer Sykes again. We don't really know how Indiana's health protocol guys are going to look tonight in terms of their conditioning. Maybe they do play, maybe they don't, so keep an eye on that. But if Brogdon's out again and Duarte's out again, I think you have to go back to Sykes, who's somehow $200 cheaper than he was the night before. And then George Hill. I talked about Milwaukee just kind of having their entire secondary and tertiary aspect of their roster just wiped out. Someone has to be the 5th starter. NBA rules say you have to start 5 guys. Probably going to be George Hill, maybe Wes Matthews. I think Whalen can probably tell you a little bit more about that definitively, but I would say both guys are less than $3,200. I would side with Hill just because he's a little bit more of a ball handler and creator. But $3,200 for someone who's going to play probably 30 minutes tonight, that's a pretty good deal.
All right, Whalen, go ahead, dude.
Yeah, I think they're going to probably start Wes Matthews just because he is more of like a true 2, but I like George Hill of the 2 if you're talking fantasy value. And we should mention, conspicuously, they did list Jordan Nwora as questionable for this game as of last night on the injury report. So he was placed in protocols just a few days ago, but it looks like maybe, could be a false positive. Maybe he's going to test out earlier than expected. So if Jordan Nwora ends up playing, I think maybe he becomes the guy that you target, obviously as a low-cost option with both Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton out. Other guys I would consider tonight, I do like Max Struss. I'm not really sure what the pronunciation is. He was lighting it up before entering COVID protocols, hasn't played since just after Christmas, so maybe a little bit of rust, but obviously going to be a lot of opportunity there with all the guys out for Miami. Furkan Korkmaz, I think, is a good value at 4,700. No Shake Milton, no Tyrese Maxey, no Matisse Thybulle for the 76ers. And then one other situation to keep an eye on is the Utah Jazz last night listed like 7 guys as questionable for tonight's game. So could be a situation where, a good team is just looking to build in some rest. So if that's the case, if a couple of key players end up sitting out, maybe even throw a dart at like a Rudy Gay or someone like an Eric Paschall.
Okay, Friar, you throwing a dart at someone here for a value play?
Yeah, but before I talk about my value play, I would like to say on Struss, check DraftKings Sportsbook for his point total tonight. If it's sub 15, right now it's at 14.5. It's off the book right now, but keep your eyes peeled on that one. That was a play I was liking while he was kind of rolling for a bit. It was usually around, the mid-teen range, and he was going over that with some high frequency. So I'll be keeping track of that tonight. But Buddy Hield is my favorite value DFS play tonight at 5.4K versus the Hawks. And I know, of course, Anthony Simons is another guy people are going to be in on. He's actually a little bit cheaper, but still, he should be very chalky. The Sacramento-Atlanta game has one of the higher game totals on DraftKings Sportsbook, and Buddy Hield's coming off consecutive 40-plus DK fantasy point performances. The Hawks are giving up a lot of fantasy production to opposing shooting guards, and they're also 4th in defensive efficiency.